What is Beijing waiting for before it comes in with that fiscal support or push?
Well, I think people have noticed that, okay, the Chinese economy is not doing great, but there's no crisis here. There's no contraction. Growth is slow, and obviously the government seems to be okay with that. It's the one that let the air out of the property market, after all. So I think they're probably holding back for a crisis that could be a trade confrontation with the U.S. That doesn't seem very likely right now, but it's got to be in the back of everyone's mind. And then it also could be a severe weakening of the global economy, probably also caused in part by U.S. trade policy. So I think China looks at this and says, growth is not that great, but we're okay with it, and we'd rather save our firepower for a real crisis.
Beijing keeps reiterating and they keep repeating that it wants to pivot towards domestic demand, it wants to pivot towards domestic growth. But when you look at current efforts to boost domestic consumption, how effective are they, considering that we know a lot of the sentiment is tied to the persistent weakness in the property sector? When my property is not, the value of my property is not going up, there's no incentive for me to spend, is there?
No, that's right. And so whenever the property market finally turns, and of course it will, things can't go on forever, that will help consumer sentiment for sure. Before then, I don't see much there. Trade-in programs, again, are explicitly temporary. You can't keep trading goods in every 6 months. So that program, while effective, was supposed to be temporary. Xi Jinping has said again and again that he really likes manufacturing and he wants Chinese goods to be used around the world and manufacturing to also address weaknesses in the sector. So I really don't see a real movement towards consumption. Again, when the property market recovers, as you said, that will help consumption. But on the policy side, I think China is much more interested in production, despite all the words to the contrary.
And production means manufacturing, it means exports. What does demand look like, given this overhang between U.S. and China when it comes to trade tariffs?
Yeah, I think China faces a problem on the manufacturing side. We've seen manufacturing by different measures not do really poorly, but certainly come off of its peaks. And you're not getting a domestic demand boost to absorb that growth. You're not getting a global economy. No one expects a global economy to be booming in 2020, the rest of 2025 or into 2026. And there's this ever-present question of, should we be selling to the U.S. if there could be a trade conflict breaks out and then we just lose those markets? So there needs to be an adjustment here where China either finds some way where domestic demand rises, or they're going to have to accept that manufacturing is slower. I don't think either choice is very pleasant for the government of Beijing, and they haven't done that yet. And that's really hanging over the second half of the year.
What do you make of that trade truce between China and the U.S.? Not a lot of details so far. I think some of the details are still being worked out. Rare earths seem to be in focus. Is that something how supportive is that for the overall Chinese economy?
Well, I think the uncertainty, I think it's, President Trump has been somewhat erratic on trade policy, but I think the uncertainty has been eased. I think it's very clear that the U.S. is not looking for a fight with China as its first priority. I mean, President Trump has mentioned Canada, he's mentioned Japan, not mentioning China, and he was a couple months ago. So I think probably U.S.-China trade relationship is okay for the rest of the year, which would be good for sentiment in the Chinese economy. There is clearly still risk. If the U.S. passes its budget bill, which was mentioned at the outset, it's going to boost the U.S. deficit. It's going to boost U.S. demand. It's going to boost demand for Chinese exports. Yay! But then you're going to have a political backlash in the United States. So I think the short term looks good in the China-U.S. relationship, are relatively good, which is a little bit of a boost to the Chinese economy. But I think a lot of Chinese firms realize if there's not a problem in November 2025, there'll be a problem in March 2026. We can't count on this.